When we work with astrology, we're actually working with a much, much vaster science, and that's the science of omens. Astrology is one aspect of the science of omens. Now, what are omens? Omens are basically the fact that life is constantly communicating to us. Everything around us is part of life. We're part of life, and everything around us is part of this one life. And you can call that one life whatever you want, spirit, God, doesn't matter. But there's a one life that's constantly creating everything that is. And that life is constantly communicating and showing us what's happening right in front of us. Now, one of the ways it does that is through astrology. So when we look at an astrology chart, we're basically looking at something in our environment, namely the positions of the planets. Even though they're far away up there in the sky, they're still a part of our environment. Okay, they're part of our solar system, which is our critical environment. Okay, and we find the planets, find the positions of the planets, and from that we read the chart and we see what life is communicating to us. So when a person's born, we might cast a chart for their birth time to see what life is telling us about this person. And we're going to use the planets to understand that. We're going to read the omens or the signs of the planets to see who that person is, how long they might live, what they're going to do in their life, if they're going to get married, what kind of problems they'll have, what kind of skills and talents they'll have. Life is communicating all those details through the positions of the planets. Okay? And again, the coincidence of the positions of the planets coincides perfectly with the coincidence of the person being born. So coincidence is really sort of a magical word. It's what the whole science of omens is dependent upon. It's that things coincide. When you're born, the planets coincide with the life experiences that you need to go through. There's a coincidence there. It's not coincidence as the way we use this word in a sort of incorrect way where we say, oh, that's just coincidence. When we say that, we're saying, oh, that's just a coincidence. What we're saying is that coincides with our life, which that means you should pay attention to it, okay? So where the planets are at your birth coincides with your life. So by studying those planets, you study your life, okay? So this whole science of omens is the science of basically coincidence, that everything is coinciding. At any moment, everything that's happening is coinciding with another thing, with everything else that's happening. So the planets are coinciding with your birth. When an event happens to you, say you meet someone, say you have a car accident, say you get a call for a job interview, at that moment, the positions of the planets are coinciding with that thing that's happening to you, with that person you just met, with that job interview, with that car accident and where it's going to lead. And so anytime an event happens to us, we can calculate a chart for the event and read the coincidence of that event, to read what's going to happen about that event by reading the coincidental factors of the planets. So mostly we talk about astrology when we talk about this. Omens are basically life communicating. Life is communicating right in front of us by showing us what he's up to, what life is up to, what life is gearing up to make happen, what life is doing right now. And one way we try to interpret what life is saying is we look at the positions of the planets through astrology, and by reading those positions which coincide with the event, with the birth, we get some insights and answers and understanding about the event or the life that's being born, the person being born. But that's only one part of omens. That's just one part of life. Imagine something happens to you. All around you, there's activity. There's motion and activity and things happening all around you. Even so, you say you meet someone. The minute you meet them, there's all these things happening around you at the same time. There's also the planets up in the sky. You don't even see them, but they're still moving and they're in a certain position. Those planets coincide with that event of you meeting that person. but also everything else around you that you're not even paying attention to. The bus stuck at a stop sign honking the bus driver in anger. The kid who crashes his bike over here. The ambulance going by in the background. All these things are coinciding with the event of you meeting a person, which means they're all omens, they're all signs, they're all coincidental signs that are going to show you the nature of your relationship with this person you just met, in the very same way that the planets are showing you it. Okay? So we talk about astrology all the time, and astrology is like the super science of omens, but it's still simply an omen. What makes it the super science of omens is that with astrology, we can mathematically calculate when the planets are going to be in a certain position. So we can read the signs of right now with the planets, but we also can read the signs of in the future with the planets, because we know where the planets are going to be in the future. So that makes astrology a super powerful thing. And because there's a mathematically, observable or calculatable way we can follow the path of the planets, we can do more things with astrology. So it's like the super science of omens. The other thing that makes astrology so great is that the level of detail that we can arrive at with the help of the planets and the zodiac signs and the nakshatras and all these other things goes way above and beyond the level of detail we can come to with any other omens, with any other things that life is trying to communicate the truth to us. However, because of that extreme level of detail possible with astrology, it becomes a very, very difficult science, because the level of detail is so high, it's easy to make mistakes. It takes years and years of studying and understanding to really come to terms with what one's doing, how to really read those signs. So it's such a precise and vast instrument with such fine level of details that there just makes it so much, it becomes not only a super science, but a super hard science. Okay? Whereas the rest of the way that life tends to communicate to us, all the things happening in our environment, tend to be much more simpler. And because of that, they let us know the simple truth, albeit without all the details. Okay? But when we're looking for an answer in something, we just need that simple answer. Lots of times omens that we see in our environment, instead of the omens of the planets in the sky, are just so easy and clear-cut to understand. All the astrology books in India all the old astrology books have a chapter on reading omens, on interpreting the signs of the moment. Some books do this more than others. There's even one book, Prajnamarga, where in this South India, the astrologer used to travel to the house of the client and prepare this elaborate reading. And the minute the astrologer left his house, he was directed to pay attention to everything he saw as he travels to the house of the client. And if he sees something along the way, he reads that as an omen, so when he gets to the client's house, before he's even cast a horoscope or done anything, he tells the client some things. Just right when he shows up on the doorstep, he says, hey, so-and-so is happening in your life. Just because of something he saw along the journey to that guy's house. Okay? So all these old astrologers relied heavily on omens, what was happening in the environment. They call this nimitta, which simply means a sign or an omen. Paying attention to what life is communicating to us, which is the coincidence. That whatever's happening around us coincides with what is happening to us. Okay? It's just that simple. So astrology is that super science. But then there's the easier part, which is the signs of coincidence. And I call it the signs of coincidence because everything that's happening around you coincides with what's happening to you and within you. And if you learn how to pay attention to those things, you learn to watch and interpret, you've got this whole world of self-discovery wherever you're going, whatever you're doing. And you'll find that when you're having a bad day, when you're having a really good day, anytime something important happens to you, there'll be this big, stark sort of omen out there telling you everything about what you need to know. The bottom line. Not everything to the level of detail that casting a chart for that moment would do, but everything you need to know. Okay? I'm going to give some examples of that in a moment, but first I just want to do some brief covers. So everything that just randomly happens or coincidentally happens around you, you want to learn how to read that. If you see an animal, if you see something out there catches your eye, if you see a certain signpost, if you hear something, if you see, I think I mentioned see an animal, whatever. If you learn how to interpret that, if you have an accident, accidents are huge omens. If you learn how to interpret all those things logically and creatively, you'll arrive at the answers in your life, okay, about what's happening in your life, the bottom line of what's happening. Then there's purposeful signs. What are purposeful signs? Well, that's when we cast something in order to arrive at an answer. Signs of coincidence is when something's happening or right before or right after, you see something and you read it and then you make a prediction or an interpretation about it, relevant to your experience that you're going through. Purposeful signs are basically when you say, oh, I'm going to do a tarot card reading, or I'm going to do a playing card reading, or I'm going to cast my Viking runes, or I'm going to go to a card reader, where somebody casts something. Somebody says, well, we're going to cast something here, and it's going to, the way these cards are going to fall in order to coincide with your experience and what you're going through. And so we're going to read how these cards are falling. That's a purposeful sign, meaning we cast it with purpose. And it's not any more powerful than a sign of coincidence, just an omen that's happening out there. It's not any less powerful than astrology. All these things are equally powerful because all these things are life communicating the bottom line truths to us of what's happening in our life so we can acquire greater self-understanding and more awareness. So purposeful signs are, especially card reading, is a really, really powerful way to get understanding about our life. I have a new website, it's about 6 months now, I guess, cardsoftruth.com, where I teach how to read cards as a purposeful omen where you cast cards, and also as a system of astrology where you don't cast cards, but you read the person's birth date based on cards instead of based on signs of the zodiac, basically. Okay, so be aware there are all these purposeful signs, and they just fall under the same category of astrology, under the category of omens. Omens is that life is telling us through signs of the planets, through signs of coincidences that are happening around us, and by us purposefully casting signs, what's happening in our life. Okay? The old astrologers used all three of these. Okay? The old astrologers from India, they used the astrology. They paid attention to what was happening in the environment. So when a client would come, if something happened in the environment when the client come, they would make a reading based on that. You know? I remember once I went to this old guy, and it was a time that I was kind of getting ready to get married, and I had some concerns that it may never happen because there was a lot of hurdles. And I went to a friend's house and I told her about, you know, where I'd been the last year of my life and what was happening. She said, oh, you have to go see so-and-so. She dragged me down to this Indian guy, and right when we get there, all these people start showing up. And some of my friends asked for me. I'm not one to usually like go to readers. I try to sort out myself. But she was like, come on, you got to go ask them. So I just mentioned what was going on, and he said, it'll all work out. That's all he said. I said, well, how do you know? He goes, well, because right after you got here, all these great friends of mine showed up. So for these great friends of mine to show up, that means you're going to end up with this person. So really simple omen, just some people showed up. So he figured people coming together, interpret that as the omen, and he was right. No astrology, no horoscopes, just a simple bottom line. It's going to work because of this omen, okay? So that's how easy these signs of coincidence can be, and they're happening all around us. So all old astrologers used to do these signs of coincidences. They also used to cast things. Okay, in Prajnamarga he'll cast like shells. There's a system of taking 108 shells or beads or Rudrashka beads or coins or something and divide them into 3 piles and doing some manipulations with those 3 piles to arrive at a 3-digit number. And based on that 3-digit number, you can answer the questions of things. That's called That's part of what's called the Ashtamangalam Prajna, which is 8 type of things you do to answer questions. It's one of those parts. And I cover that in my astrologyvideos.com. I have some courses on that if anyone wants to get into that more. But the old astrologers used to do purposeful signs, to cast things. Okay? But the majority is astrology. Astrology has the advantage because it's so vast, it's so detailed, but that also makes it very tricky and hard. Astrology has 3 branches. You have your natal astrology, where somebody's born, and based on that birth, you examine the omens of the planets in the sky and attempt to make predictions throughout the entire person's life based on that one set of omens. That's really hard. That's the hardest branch of astrology to use, we could say, because from one set of omens in the sky, we're trying to predict, the next 70 years of the person's life. It's very intricate. It's it's very easy to see the life and the nature of life. Oh, you're going to have money, you're not going to have money, you're going to have love, you're not going to have love. These are your issues, these are your strengths. That's easy. But then saying you're going to have love this year and not have it this year, you'll have money this year and not have it this year, it gets really, really tricky and hard. As a result, old astrologers always use these other things to help. They also use something called prajna to help, which is casting a chart for the moment. So you could just read the birth chart about the person, and then they can come in for a reading, and you'll calculate the chart for the moment they came in. And based on that moment, you'll read the events of their life for the next year. You'll just read that one chart for when they show up to read their life for the next year. Or they might have a question. They might say, I lost something. And you'll cast a chart for the moment that they ask you the question. Or you can say, do you know when you lost it? And you can calculate the chart for the moment they lost the question, that they lost the item. And from that, you can arrive at where the item is placed and if it'll be found. For instance, one time my dad was visiting, and he left. He finished his visit and he left. And half an hour later, he comes peeling back into the driveway in this total state of panic, saying he'd lost his wallet. He goes, I know it has to be here. I put it away so the kids wouldn't find it. My kids were like 2 or 3 at the time. But one of them must have found it and put it somewhere. So he's frantically starting to tear up the house, looking at everything, looking for the wallet. I told him, there's no way the kids took your wallet. They know, even though they're young, they know better than that. So while he's frantically tearing through the house, I went to my computer and I cast a chart for the moment. And the chart for the moment showed that the wallet would be found. It was in something connected to the 4th house. Well, 4th house is vehicles, so I figured it had to be his 4th house, his vehicle. And it was in the south. So his car was parked in my driveway with the south end facing, the trunk facing the south. So by that time he'd finished kind of digging through parts of my house and decided to dig through his car some more. So he's digging through the front of his car, and I go over there and I open the hood. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting your wallet. He goes, it's no way it's in the back of my car. I said, yes, it's in here. Just give me a minute, I'll find it for you. So I start looking in the back of the trunk. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And one of the planets that related to the lost article was Saturn. And of course, Saturn rules like dirty things. So I found this grocery bag, and it had some cloth in it or something, and I kind of felt it, and I felt something square. So I said, oh, here it is. I opened up the bag, and his wallet was in his dirty laundry bag. Okay, he had left it in his pants pockets. When the pants are dirty, thrown them in the laundry bag. So just as the prajna had said, it was in the south of the vehicle by something dirty, in the dirty laundry, namely. So we can use prajna to find lost articles. If somebody meets somebody and says, oh, I met a new person, you calculate a chart for that moment and you read their relationship. I got a new job. When did you start the job? Cast a chart for that. When did you have your interview? Cast a chart. Or cast a chart for when they ask you. So you can cast a chart, which is called a prajna, and that will let you read the omens of the planets for that moment. And it's a very, very powerful system as well. It also makes it a lot easier to interpret what's happening in the natal chart if you use both together. Because sometimes the natal chart's really confusing, and the prajna chart, because it has so many years of details of your life, that a prajna chart can make it a lot easier. Many people have been asking me to teach prajna. I've taught like 1 or 2 1-hour mini courses on simple prajna things. But I'm finally going to start doing a full prajna class, to really get into prajna at my Vedic or my astrologyvideos.com website. Okay? The other use of astrology as an omen is in mundane astrology. And that's basically watching the planets, watching the eclipses, watching the comets to see what's happening on a global level, what's happening to cultures and countries and the world at large. That's a great system of astrology. Sadly, not many astrologers really devote themselves to it. I think because it doesn't pay the bills. But Brihad Jataka by Varaha Mihira covers all these amazing mundane astrology of reading the planets and all kinds of astronomical omens, halos around the moon touching certain stars, all kinds of astronomical things to predict what's happening in the world. Okay? Signs of coincidence or omens is something I'm going to start teaching here pretty soon too, as soon as I start getting into this prajna course. Signs of coincidence is just the omens that are happening around you. That's huge. I use that more for myself than anything else. I'm always paying attention to the environment and reading it and getting the answers. One way I like to do that is with animals. Animals are huge omen givers. If something happens or you're going through something or you're thinking something really, you're really concentrating trying to figure something out and you see an animal, that animal will have the answer to your problems. He'll be spelling it out for you. There's a great deck of cards called medicine cards. More importantly, it has a book, medicine card book, that gives you the meanings of about 50, 60 different animals that you might encounter. It's written by Jamie Sands and David Carson. I recommend getting that as a great book for omens. You can also cast purposeful signs, cast cards with that deck, but I like it just for the book. Reading that book kind of just opened my mind to looking and listening to what animals have to say and paying attention to what animals have to say when they show up. And it's really profound sometimes. For instance, one time I had a client come, and right when they came down, they were so excited. They said, "Oh, I just saw an opossum." Excitement wasn't the right word. The first thing they said when they walked in was, "I just saw an opossum." I'm like, "Oh." And I'm like, "Wow, this is important because opossum is a heavy omen." So I said to them, "Was it alive or was it dead?" They're like, "Oh, it was dead." But I said, "Have you ever seen an opossum ever before?" They said, "No, this is the first one I've ever seen in real life," but it was dead. So I thought to myself, well, opossum has the omen of deception. Because what opossums do, they play dead. They deceive you. When they're in danger, they fall over and act dead, so you won't mess with them. So if you see an opossum, it means that you're being deceived, perhaps, and or perhaps you're kind of hiding something, deceiving something, because it's the only way to get yourself out of some trouble. It may be the healthiest way to get out of trouble, like the opossum. He falls over, plays dead, because that's the best way for him to get out of trouble. So sometimes we need to be deceptive in order to stay out of trouble, to keep our lives from being threatened. That's a good omen. But this was a dead opossum. And a dead opossum is, represents a bad omen. Dead animals are always bad omens, kind of mean the omen is backwards. So the minute they said it was dead, I knew that they were deceiving themselves about something. They were lying to themselves, had self-deception going on. And we got into the reading and she starts talking about her boyfriend and how great her relationship is and how happy she was. I'm thinking, no, this is all bullshit. You're deceiving yourself about this. You're not in love with this guy. So I talked to her a little more and I said, no, actually you're actually in love with this guy. And I said, you like this guy? She's like, no. This is the guy. I'm like, yeah, right. So I knew she was deceiving herself, and we didn't make a lot of progress in that area, but we read some other things. But the dead opossum, the deception, the self-deception was present in respect to her boyfriend that she was with currently. A couple days later, I was walking home from the beach, and I happened to walk past this dead opossum. And I thought to myself, I wonder if this was the same opossum this client saw. Shortly thereafter, I bumped into the client. I said, how's this going? She goes, when I saw that dead opossum, I said, oh, this girl's relationship with her old boyfriend is over. And then right after that, I bumped into her. And first thing she said, she goes, oh, by the way, I broke up with my boyfriend. So I just bumped into her on the street, walking home from the beach, coincidentally with the dead opossum. So, this really unique prediction just because of a dead opossum. Okay? I remember one time I was in Hawaii and I was having a bad day. I think I had like one bad day when I lived in Hawaii. I had a great time there. But one day I was having a bad day. I was having trouble getting anyone to rent me an apartment. I was kind of one of those days where you just kind of wonder if you're supposed to be on planet Earth, And it was this huge rainstorm, and it was windy, and it was blowing, and I didn't even have, like I said, I couldn't even get an apartment. I was struggling getting somebody to rent me an apartment. I had plenty of money, but everyone was never giving me the house or the apartment I wanted to rent. And it was getting really frustrating. And I was outside under an umbrella doing something, and it was windy and raining. I was just feeling like, I don't even belong on this planet. What am I doing here? And I happened just out of the corner of my eye through some miracle, like literally 200 feet away on top of this tall tree, a green tall tree, because trees are always green in Hawaii. There's this huge chameleon, like this big, one of the ones with the 3 horns, and he was just hanging on to this branch on top of this tree, and the tree was just getting blown around. And he was exactly the color of the tree, but somehow I just saw him. It was like a miracle for me to even see that chameleon that was so far away, but he was a big one. And I thought to myself, chameleon. And I said, what does the chameleon do? Look at that thing. It's like an alien life form. His hands move like this. He's got these eyes that roll around. He has these horns. If there's ever an animal that lives on the surface of the earth that doesn't look like it belongs on earth, that looks like an alien creature, it's those type of chameleons. I thought to myself, look at this chameleon. He doesn't even belong here. He's a total alien life form. And here I am, feeling like wondering where I belong on this planet because I'm having a bad day. But what does the chameleon do? He just blends in, and that's how he gets through life. He blends in. He changes his color. He blends in. So I said, okay, I'm just going to blend in. I'm just going to blend in into this Hawaiian culture. I'm going to blend into Hawaii for now and see what happens. And I just started doing that, and everything worked out perfectly. I got totally taken care of by Hawaii the remainder of the time that I was there. Another time I remember, I was dealing with the person, and the communication had sort of fallen apart. And I was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And I was on a bike ride, and I went through this 5-minute phase on my bike ride where I just really started focusing on what was going on with this person. What's going on, When am I going to hear from this person? When am I going to get the response that I've been waiting for? And right then, I saw a hawk flew above me really close. Well, hawks represent just messages. They're messengers when it comes to the science of omens. So I said, oh, I'll have a communication from them when I get home. I get home, there's a communication there. Okay? So omens do this all the time. I could just give you lists and lists of omens in my own life, and of animals alone. And when they happen, you can just interpret something importantly about your life or about another person's life. So always pay attention to those animals. It's one great type of omen. And I've always found animal omens to be one of the more powerful omens. I remember once I was going through something, and I got these mice in my house, and over a 1 week period, I caught like 5 or 6 mice. And they're all omens to what was happening in my life. Okay? So it's really funny how it works. Other signs of coincidences are everything that's happening, every non-living thing, every living thing that's happening. So for instance, once I went to a restaurant with somebody, and this person was from India, and they paid attention to omens. In India, they don't like sirens. When they hear a siren of something, they say, oh, it's bad. They'll say, oh, it's a bad omen. So anyway, we went to this new restaurant we'd never been in before. And right after we walk in, right when we sit down, right on the street of the restaurant, this siren starts blasting by, an ambulance, and she's like, oh no, let's go, the food's not going to be good. I said, the food is going to be great. I said, if that ambulance had gone by and we were on the outside of the building and we were about to come in or walking towards it, then the food would have been bad. I said, but since we're here in the restaurant and the ambulance is outside, the ambulance is telling us we're not going to find any better food out there in this town. this is the best place that we're going to find food in this town. So as it turned out, it was one of the best Thai food restaurants we'd ever gone to. So just funny little simple things that don't even matter. Like, is this good food or bad food? Omens will answer the question. So you want to pay attention to everything. One time I was working on a project with someone. Or no, I was hoping to work on a project with someone. Okay? And about a year before I met the person to start working on a project for, I got myself this bicycle, a bike frame that I wanted. It was called a Crescent. And the logo on the Crescent was this, a moon. It was a moon bike. It had moon logos. It was called Crescent. It was a Swiss-made bike, and Crescent referred to the moon on it. And it was an old bike frame from the 60s. And I had wanted one for a while, and I got one. I said, and then I was really clear that I wanted to work on a project with someone, a certain type of project. I needed someone with a certain amount of skills. And I got the frame right when I got clear that I wanted to work on this project. But I didn't really put that together for a whole nother year. Then a year later, I finally pulled that frame off the garage ceiling where it had been hanging for a year and decided to finally put some parts on it and take it out and ride it, see if I liked it. The week, like not even the week, but right when I pulled that frame down and started building it, I met someone, and they seemed to have the talents, the qualities that I was looking for to work with this project. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Here I am building this frame that I've been wanting to build for a long time. And right then I met a person with the talents to maybe work on this project. So over a couple of weeks, I'm building my bike, I'm getting to know this person, I'm discussing things every once in a while. Finally, 2 or 3 weeks later, I finally finished building the frame. It's only a few hours of work, but I only get in there 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, so it takes a couple of weeks, and I get it done, and I go on a bike ride, and I hated it. And I was like, I didn't like how it rode. It wasn't stiff enough to hold my weight. It was too soft, too mushy. And I said, this bike isn't strong enough for me. And it's a Crescent. And here's the interesting thing. The person that I'd met had an Upmakaraka soul planet was the moon. Right when I started building that bike. So I'm like, oh, they're the moon. And here I am riding a moon bike. The moon bike is not solid enough for me. The Crescent bike wasn't solid enough for me. This person is not going to be strong enough, solid enough to do this project with. And that's how I read the Omen. And as it turned out, that's exactly the way it was. That moon-ruled person who had a moon soul planet, which is the defining planet in a person's chart, the most important planet in a person's chart, just wasn't strong enough, just wasn't anchored enough to bear the weight of the project. The same way that the frame wasn't solid enough to bear my 190 pounds. Okay? So sometimes these omens are really interesting and elaborate, so you pay attention to it all and you watch it and you learn, and you'll learn a lot. So I'm going to start doing some videos on omens. What I thought would be fun, and accidents too. Recently I had a friend who had a bad accident, and it kind of set their lives into turmoil, and they wanted to come over and get a card reading for me. And I sat them down, I just asked them all the details about the accident, how it happened, the buildings around, where they were going, what direction they were going. And we talked about the omen of the accident for a solid hour. And there was so much that they paid attention to, because they were a wise person, that they paid attention to everything that was out there, that I was able to talk about the omens of that accident for well over an hour. And it was all the reading they needed. We didn't even end up casting cards. It wasn't even necessary to look at a horoscope, to cast cards. The omen of the accident revealed everything the person needed to know about. So I thought one way we can get into everyone appreciating the omens and learning the omens is to start paying attention to your world. And if something happens to you, pay attention to what's around you, to the coincidences. Then write to me, and we'll do a little video on reading that omen for you. And maybe we can do a few fun videos of people's lives and the omens and what they mean. So you can see how these omens work. Accidents, animals, anything interesting around you is telling you the answer to what's going on. There's also, all the old astrology books will have a sign and omens. Like, some of the stuff is really crude. Like, they'll say, if a guy comes and asks about a girl, if you hear the sound of sighing, then say that she's not a good girl, that she sleeps around with everybody, because sighing's like this kind of motion. Or if you see somebody digging a hole, So these omens are just real logical things. Somebody, if you meet a guy and there's somebody over on the street using a jackhammer in the ground, that means that guy's intentions are really clear. He wants you for your body. That's why he's approaching you, because he thinks you're sexy and wants to have sex with you. That omen of a guy busting the ground with a jackhammer is all you need to know that guy's most sincere, his most prioritized intentions towards you. Okay? Same thing if you meet a woman. Whatever happened, if you pay attention to the loudest thing, the most obvious thing that's happening around you, there's a lot to be answered. That thing will answer a lot of what's happening. Now, astrology is a super science. It's like your eyes. Your eyes are your super sense. Our eyes are so important. When we want to hear a song, we say, can I see how that sounds? Right? So if we want to hear a noise, can I see how that sounds? Oh, that food looks good. Can I see how it tastes? Oh, can I see what that flower smells like? We always use see, even though we're using our other senses. We don't go, can I smell how that flower smells? Can I taste how that food tastes? We say, can I see how it tastes? Can I see how it smells? Can I see how it sounds? Because we're so invested in our sight. Sight is like our super sense. Astrology is the same. It's like a super omen. It's like our sight. But then we've also got our ears, we've got our touch, we've got our taste, and we've got our smell. We've got these 4 other senses. And that's what these other omens are like the signs of coincidence. So just using astrology, without using the rest of the environment, what it's communicating to you, is sort of like walking around with your eyes open, but you're deaf, you don't have a tongue to taste, you have no sensory impressions on your skin, and you can't smell. It's like running around with only your eyes and none of your other 4 senses. You can get by, but you're going to miss a lot. And that's why all the old astrologers paid heavy emphasis to the signs of coincidence, what's happening around us. One of the great things about using signs of coincidence is that you can, you don't need birth time. You don't need to ask the person for the birth chart. So if you meet someone, you pay attention to the signs of coincidence. You don't need to say, oh, what's your birth data? You just pay attention to what's happening to you in your world, and maybe go home and cast a chart for that moment, a prajna chart for that moment, if you want to, and then you can read the whole thing. But just from the most important omen at the moment, you can interpret a lot. And it's about developing an awareness of life, an awareness of what's happening to you, and realizing you're part of everything that's happening. You're not this isolated little being. You're part of a much vaster ocean of life where that is happening all around you, and you're part of that, of what's happening. So by paying attention to what's happening, you're actually paying attention to what's happening to you in a way that you can see more clearly than just by trying to analyze your own feelings and thoughts and hopes, desires, which get really convoluted and confused because your ego is so invested in all those things that it can hide the truth. But the omens, they're just these detached things that take you out of the box, say, this is how it is. This is how it is. Okay? So I'm going to be teaching omens now, talking more about omens. But like I said, it'd be great to have your help in that, because part of the way to teach omens is to analyze it. Is for you guys to learn, watch me analyze omens that you've seen. So whenever something happens, look around you. Get all the details possible, not just 1 or 2, but everything. Like this one person, I had a bad accident recently. They knew they were going to an observatory. They knew that there was a cemetery across the street where they had the accident. They knew the names of the roads that they were on. And all those small details of the accident came into play with the accident and so on. When you hurt yourself, when you cut yourself, when you trip and sprain your ankle, when you burn yourself, those are all omens. What body part got hurt? Animal omens, so powerful. I remember another case where somebody, a guy and his girl, they got pregnant. They weren't married, they got pregnant. They've been having a really bumpy road. Then they got pregnant, and everything was going great. Finally, that they were pregnant, they started working out. So then finally the person calls me and said, look, finally things are working. And they'd been to me over this relationship many times. Like, finally things are working. And they're talking to me on the phone, and they're like, it's all working fine, it's so good, but something doesn't feel right. All right, when they told me about this, I saw this huge lizard on the curtain. Somehow it had gotten inside, and there's this big lizard on the curtain. And I said, wow, lizard is a dreamer. Lizard is about dreaming. And I knew that they were living in this dreamland at the time. I said, you know, what you're at now is this ideal dreamland of being together and being pregnant together. I said, but this is a dream. This isn't the reality of your situation. It's all going to change very shortly. Well, a week later, not even a week later, 2 days later, the girl miscarried at about 6 weeks. The minute she miscarried, their relationship went back into the negative space it had always been, and their relationship fell apart, and that was it. So, you know, no charts, sometimes just the animal, omen, or some other omen's all you need. It's a really great way to get your answers answered, and it's simple. It's a good layman's thing. Anyone can do it. You don't have to spend years of study. You don't have to invest in software. You don't need your computer. You just have to pay attention and logically analyze things. Okay? And I will, do some courses on this too, so we can, you can understand that. All right, so astrology is part of the greater science of omens. So when we're astrologists, we're really omenologists. We're just paying attention to the life around us, which includes the planets, the planets, the animals, the people, the concrete things. Everything around us is part of this coincidental life that's showing us the answers. And so instead of just sticking with astrology, I'm going to start doing classes on the other stuff, because I thought to myself, teaching people astrology all the time, but when it comes to what I use a lot, just as my life, what's helped me so much, is just knowing how to read the signs of the omens, paying attention to my world around me, and getting the answers without even having to calculate a chart as it's happening. Oh, I already know this. Oh, this is showing this. Let's see how it's going to work out. Yep, worked out just the way the omen said. So a lot of our answers will just be naturally answered by the world at large, and we don't need to do any more studying than that. It's a great way to be attuned to what's happening in your life. So more of that fun, easy, and really profoundly important and useful stuff to come. Okay, thank you.